I'll call the September 21, 2023 meeting of the Charter Review Commission to order. The first matter on the agenda is to approve the minutes from August 10, 2023. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion to approve the minutes from August 10, 2023. Anybody have any comments about those minutes? All those in favor of approving those minutes, please say aye. Aye. Is anybody opposed? The ayes have it, 6-0. The next matter is election of officers. I've respectfully asked Kate O'Connor to take over as chair and respectfully recommended that Maya take over as vice chair. So I nominate Kate O'Connor as chair of the Charter Revision Commission.
But if somebody wants to have a coup over my coup, you can have a coup.
Are there any other nominations for that spot? Hearing none. That's the last item. As chair of the Charter Revision Commission, all those in favor of Kate O'Connor being chair, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? That carries 6-0, 5-0. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, and David, thank you for your chairmanship. Yay. Now we've got to elect a vice chair, so I want to, oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay, if you want to. I just want to ask David. David, do you intend to stay on the commission, or are you?
100%.
Good.
I'd love to be the grunt.
Okay. I'm just
But
curious
you're
whether
responsible
it's
for organizing the
stepping
meetings.
down as chair or stepping off.
No, staying on the commission.
Very good.
Now I want to nominate Maya Hasagawa for vice chair. Are there any, does anyone else want to make a nomination for vice chair? All right, all those in favor of electing Maya our vice chair, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you, everybody. Tonight, we're talking with town officials and getting their initial thoughts about anything charter. And we've got the Assistant Town Manager, Patrick Moreland, the Town Attorney, Bob Fisher. We've got the Vice Chair of the Select Board, Franz Reichman, and we have the Chair of the Select Board, Ian Goodnow, and we have Town Clerk, Hillary Francis. And what we're going to do, and we all should feel free to take part in this discussion. Patrick or Hillary have nicely put together a sheet for us on some of their thoughts. And these aren't necessarily things that they are saying you gotta change. You know, these are ideas of things that they want us to consider. Or might give us thoughts of other things to consider. So really what we want to do, as opposed to making it this regimented thing, all of us have a discussion together, because everybody's seeing it from different perspectives. So does that make sense to everybody? And if anybody in the public wants to ask a question or make a comment, we're happy to take that too. So who's going to, is it Patrick or Hillary's going to bring us through this list?
Shall we get started?
Yeah, and just one of the things that Patrick or Bob is going to be good to reminding us, we don't want to get stuck for like 20 minutes on one of these things. Like if we see something and we know, oh, we want more information about it, we just want to sort of like, you know, mark it. And then, you know, follow up at another meeting.
Before we get started, can I steal one of the paper copies? Anyone else need one?
Are those the same ones? Oh, yes, please. That's new, right?
Anyone with?
Yeah, I've got a
Yeah.
printout, but I'd rather have one of these.
The one with the orange cover
Is the number.
includes the 16-year-old code.
Whoa.
There's a mistake on it?
No, I have a slightly older version.
Oh,
We have a lot of those kicking around.
Slightly older versions?
That's why the color scheme helps.
And I just want to, Patrick will go through it, but I just want to say to our select board people, if there's something you see here that you go, oh, that relates to something that we do, please pipe in.
Cool. So we will try not to take, hours and hours. I know we have been susceptible to going way too deep on our own. But this is a list that we've compiled after seeking input from the various department heads honestly, most of whom didn't have much to say. Some of whom had quite a bit to say. Most of which I would say, just as Kate mentioned, is sort of a, we think this is something we ought to think about. And in very few instances, and I think there are some points that Hillary will make where, please help, this should be changed. But starting from the top is a note about front cover, and that came from Bob Fisher, so I'll let him speak to it.
Yep. It's just that for many years on the front cover, we had adopted in 1984 with various amendments. From my perspective, you may want to talk about when it was originally adopted, and I don't know if you want to list all of the various amendments like you sometimes see on a zoning thing, or just say most recently amended with whatever the most recent thing is. Very minor point, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. And I know that the commission here has done a lot of research in this last year on looking at prior commissions and the prior charter amendments. So to the extent you want to put that history in, it's worth noting it either on the front cover or in the preamble even. Okay.
You're the next one.
Okay, I'm going to keep moving, and the idea here is if we really stop and we spend 5 minutes on something, we might want to just say that, save it for another day so that we get through these. Article 2, Section 2 is the section that sets forth which elected officers get elected on the first Tuesday in March. My thought there is to consider either referencing Title 17, 2646, which is the list of statutorily elected local officers in each town. Why this charter sets forth some of those elected officials and not all, I don't have an answer. So it's just either we should list them all in the charter or make reference to the statute. It doesn't make sense to me to have a partial list. Okay?
Now, I'm not going to belabor this, but what are some of the ones that aren't in here?
I don't have that right with me, but you have other things like and some in Brattleboro are appointed, but if you look at the statutory list, you've got treasurers, town clerks, constables, on down the line. And some are here and others are not. For instance, well, you do have moderator. The ones I just listed actually are in here, but there are others in 2646 that are not listed here. Okay, so at another meeting I can give you the full list, and either you can decide to put them all in or just make a reference, because there's nothing really different other than it's a partial list. Okay.
So if that was something you wanted to consider, of course, we could probably draft some language and you could then consider that.
May I just chime in for just one moment, if that's okay?
Oh, yeah.
The one thing that we probably won't see in statute that is on this list is representative town meeting members, because that's specific to Brattleboro.
Correct.
So we want to consider that as well.
Okay. Good point.
So you want to hit
Yep.
section 2.3b?
Yep, Article 2, 3B. Representative town meeting with regard to the number of members, and is just something that I point out just for the commission to think about. It appears to me that over the years at the informational meeting, at which time we hold the caucuses, there are always slots to fill, and it just strikes me that if you're always just filling it by people coming to a meeting, it's kind of a walk-on type of a thing. Maybe you want to reduce the numbers to make it more competitive. That's just a thought. Totally up to you. There's nothing wrong with the way it's done right now. It's just a thought. Okay? Article 2, Section 4A2 are the ratifications, okay? Town clerk, town treasurer, town attorney, okay?
Town moderator.
This is
Oh, sorry.
thinking voting members.
Yeah. Should they be, and the moderator, should they be voting members? And if the answer is yes, should there be a qualification then of them being residents of the town and registered voters in order to be voting members? I think we have some folks who think that they should be voting, and others that think that their position should be absolutely apolitical and not be voting. So again, do you want to add anything to that, Hillary?
No, I think that covers it. It's just a question of, should those 3 ex officio members be voting members?
Do you have any opinion as to whether the town clerk should be?
I feel that the town clerk should not be. The town clerk is meant to remain neutral as it relates to all elections, and sitting in front of the body and having a public vote, being the person who deals with the logistics, who writes the minutes. I don't feel it's appropriate that the town clerk should be a voting member.
Incidentally, I've also spoken with the town treasurer, and the town treasurer finds it odd that they would be a voting member, and that, sees themselves as sort of support staff and would like to be not thought of as somebody who can be swayed in favor or opposed to something.
Well, and also, if they're not required to be a Brattleboro resident, that's part of it too, right? So if like the town treasurer or town clerk lived in Vernon, could they still be a voting member?
Well, that actually almost came up 2 years ago. Andre Yeager was briefly our finance director and would have been appointed treasurer had they stayed with us, I assume. But they didn't live in Brattleboro, and so then, do you have a voting member of RTM who resides in New Hampshire? That seems a little strange.
The moderator traditionally is a voting member, but doesn't vote except to break a tie. So I would leave the moderator as a voting member. That would be my preference.
Okay.
Next is, from time to time and over the years, the wording in there that representative town meeting exercises exclusively all powers vested in the voters of the town. That has been questioned as to what that means and how forceful it is. It, in my view, does not mean that RTM has all the functions of voters in the town. I mean, you've got a division of how your town government is subdivided, and so we may just want to clarify what that role of the representative members, what that role is. Okay?
Hey, where is that? I've lost
It
myself.
says, it's in the middle of that big paragraph 2, it says, it exercises exclusively all
First.
powers vested in the
Oh, I
voters
see
of
it.
the town.
I'm sorry.
It's actually right above the part about, we should have reversed those, because it's right above the part about the ex officio members. And then next is the practice of the date confirming representative town meeting at the prior town meeting, and do we really need that in there? Was that yours, Hillary?
It was.
Yeah. It's just that we set it, so we don't really talk, we don't talk at representative town meeting, shall we set the third Saturday in March. We just never do that. It's just, that's what it is. So, do we need that language?
certainly there's nothing wrong with telling everybody, we'll see you next year on such and such a date, but
But wasn't there something that came up that if so can the date be changed? I thought I remember something happening that, or it's by charter that it's that day, so.
yeah, the formula for what date is spelled in the charter. I will get it wrong probably. I think it's the third Saturday after the first Tuesday.
Right.
But
You definitely want to have it,
First sentence.
Yeah.
you definitely want it stated
Yeah.
in your governing document, just like the statutes talk about, you know, the first Tuesday in March as town meeting day,
Yeah.
typically. So, in any event, food for thought.
So you could leave the first sentence and delete the rest of the paragraph
Yeah.
if we
Good.
felt we wanted to.
Or if you wanted to leave the ability to change it, you could take out the first sentence.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, exactly.
The next one that has come up at many representative town meetings is the finance committee and its makeup and how it is appointed. We tend to spend a lot of time on that. There's nothing right or wrong with that, but it says the representative town meeting shall fix and from time to time may alter the number of members, the manner of their election, their terms of office, their compensation, if any, and duties and functions. So it seems like every year at representative town meeting, you've got a big topic there to cover. It may make sense to try to define that more clearly.
Now with the former, yeah.
Yeah, that's something that was a sticking point every year when I was chair of the finance committee. I didn't really know how or when we should recruit or add members, especially if we lost members during the year. It could have been a lot more clear as to just what the procedures are.
I have a question. How many members do you think is optimal? Tell us later.
I think 5 to 7 maybe, more, yeah, somewhere in there.
Ready to move on?
Yeah.
Jumping to Article 3, which is the powers of the people. There are a couple things here. The first, we have this section on the power of the people to have advisory votes. Whether or not those votes are germane to the issues of the town, or actual work of the town. That actually went up in a court case and came back saying because it says on anything, we've got to do it, and then the charter was subsequently amended to say it can be, you know, do we want to have a referendum on whether the sky is blue or pink or yellow, okay? If you get the number of signatures, that can go on for an advisory vote. A lot of towns, and the case law in Vermont is if it's not germane, select boards have the authority to say, we're not going to put that on a ballot for town meeting. Brattleboro's is different, so I just point that out. And as a commission, do you think that we should have something that can go so far afield of the actual business of the meeting? So that's topic one. Topic two really has, and I probably should have added more to this bullet point. There is confusion on petitioning to have a binding article for representative town meeting. So if the select board doesn't decide to put something on, people can still petition to have an article go to representative town meeting. There's only a few types of articles that go to the electorate as a whole. Most everything comes to town meeting. But the question is, and under state statute, that's still a 5% of your registered voters. do you want to keep that at 5% or should it be higher? And then that leads to what I did put in here, in that we have this funny article that says you can petition for the inclusion in the warning of an article to adopt an ordinance, all right? To my knowledge, we're the only town in Vermont where you can petition to adopt an ordinance. That, in all other towns, is the province of the select board. I mean, the select board gets elected, but the select board passes your ordinances pursuant to Title 24, Section 1972, etc. In Brattleboro, we have this right for the people to petition for a particular ordinance, and it requires 10% of the voters of the town to bring that forward to a vote. I just point out that it's unique. Do you want it? Do you not want it? Type of a thing.
Somewhat sheepishly, I recognize that I don't really know exactly what the word ordinance means. What are the limits on
Well,
what's under
ordinances
that?
are your laws of the town of Brattleboro. So your sewer ordinance, your, skateboard ordinance, your peddlers, itinerant vendors, business licenses, any ordinance that it is a regulation that can be enforced. It's adopted by the select board and then enforced pursuant to the.
And how about a tax rate or a budget or?
No, tax
those are
rates
not-
and budget are not ordinances.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
I think David had a question.
My preference would be to see this section 2, at the very least, reordered, so that the very first thing is not that advisory articles that have nothing to do with town business can be placed on the agenda. It just seems backwards. I mean, if we want to leave that provision in place, and it was hard fought, I think, in the last 10 or 15 years, at the very least, it should be prioritized in its order of actual priority, which is non-relevant business comes last.
That's right, that's always a bone of contention.
I somewhat jumped ahead and spoke to the comment in Article 3, 2D. Article 3, Section 2.
Yeah, there is no section D. You were proposing, what if we added a section D?
Yeah, that's what I was getting at in terms of having petitioning for a binding article. So you can petition to have an article on for representative town meeting. If it's going to be binding, my question is, what percentage for that petition do you assign to that? 5, 7, 10, it's up to you, okay? Article 3, Section 5A is a recall provision, and that is also somewhat unique to Brattleboro. Most towns do not have impeachment of elected officials. The check and balance for that is the electoral process. However, the town of Brattleboro has the ability of the voters to recall any of the elected town officials, and it requires 25% of the legal voters to petition for such a recall, okay? And with regard to that, again, do you think that the percentage is appropriate? Because if recall is synonymous with impeachment, should it have a fairly high percentage? I think that's why that is a higher percentage. And then also, just food for thought is to think about whether that should carry with it some sort of a for cause. Even if there's a petition for it, then what is the standard that you apply for a recall? Is it just purely a vote, popularity type thing, or is there some other standard or causal relation, just cause, things like that to go with it? we up to Article 4? Any questions?
I was gonna ask the elected officials if they have any thoughts on recall.
First off, thanks so much for having us. It's great to be here. It's great to be on this side of the table. Yeah, I think if you had a for-cause provision in Article 3, Section 5A, boy, I could see some like, would you have to litigate that first before evaluating the legitimacy of the petition? You know, that's a tricky question. I think I would find myself more leaning towards the side of your commission, just making sure that the threshold is so high that it would really need to be something so severe that you could get enough signatures, right? Which would hopefully avoid just the popularity vote concern that I think is legitimate that Attorney Fisher brings up.
I think it's a really good question.
But it's also who determines if it's a good cause or not, you know what I mean, like,
I think that the recall is a whole political question.
Yeah.
I don't think you can add a good cause standard to it. It's a good question to think about.
yeah,
Preliminarily, I would be opposed to adding that.
yeah.
25% of the voters is a lot of voters.
Yeah, and I speak on, I don't really think 25% is like not, like I think that might be a good number right there. It's a lot of people to get.
Yeah.
How many is 25%, Hillary?
We just purged 900 something voters from our checklist, so we probably have 8,700 voters roughly, so whatever 25% of that is, I'm not good with.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Well, it's more than the total turnout for most of our municipal elections, so effectively, it's a large number.
Yeah.
And
You could put something in there about high crimes and misdemeanors, I suppose.
we also, in the town clerk's office, would go through and verify every one of those names, make sure that there are no duplicates, make sure that every one of them is registered to vote at the address that they sign the petition. It would have to be legible, so oftentimes there's a certain percentage of petitions that don't count because of those aspects.
Moving on, I just, the next section, if you get to Article 4, Section 5 goes as to appointments. So you have your chair and vice chair, et cetera, the town manager, and we have a whole other section on that. While it's not noted in the bullet, I'm not sure that the section, and I'm happy not to talk to this, on the town attorney goes into a lot of detail there, which I'm not sure that that's needed in there, because what goes into representing the town is probably a longer list than that, just like the town manager's duties are more than just what's in that paragraph. So again, that may want to be edited, but I'm trying to say that without, obviously conflict of interest there, but do as you please with that. It's not going to harm me one way or the other of what you do with that.
If I may, so that someone else speaks on it, that's not the person holding the position. Yeah, I think reading through that section today and a couple other sections too, I think I would urge you all to either land on the side of being exhaustive in a list or not having a list and referring to where the list is or some other way. Hitting a weird middle ground where you're kind of enumerating some of them, but there's probably other stuff there could get us into a sticky situation in the future. And I probably would lean towards not doing an exhaustive list because then you're going to have a really long charter.
I think the next one, Article 4, Section 5F, simply goes to the certification of the appointments to the town clerk. And Hillary, it's my understanding, you can speak to it, that's simply just not being done, right?
Correct. It's not a practice. I've been in the position for almost 7 years. And this isn't a practice that I've seen certainly since I've been here.
So I think the question then becomes, is it a practice we need to take up, or is it genuinely necessary? Is there some function that performs? Does the town attorney think so?
It doesn't seem to me, the only thing that I can think of where the certification may have a statutory route to it is with regard to things like the Planning Commission and the Development Review Board, that I'll check the statute on that, because if those statutes say that you have to certify, then we'll have to keep that. But I think we could consolidate that, and it's somewhat of a segue into the next long list on in page 7 there of all of the appointments of the committees and boards. So that list is in the charter, and of course sometimes from time to time we add ad hoc committees that the select board creates, and then we also have an addendum C, a description of the boards and commissions and committees. So to what Ian was just saying, either let's have an exhaustive list or a reference to something which could be addendum C, which could change from time to time. So again, I think you're going to find that as a theme. Do you have exhaustive lists, or do you make reference to something else? And that's going to need to be a policy decision that your commission makes.
Is there some benefit to having it in an addendum as opposed to the charter? Like, is it easier to modify the addendum?
It depends on how you reference the addendum. If we reference it in such a way that as attached here to, and which list may be modified from time to time by the select board, then your charter is saying the select board can change that list from time to time. You could, just thinking outside the box here too, you could probably say as modified by representative town meeting on a year-to-year basis. If RTM really wanted to change or create a new committee, it has that authority. So that's something to think about as to, if it's not going to be in the charter, then what body would be the one making that list?
Also, just to the practicality of reference. So, yeah, sometimes if you need to like pull the charter up to look at something, if it's gonna have everything in it that would have been in an addendum, it's gonna be a lot longer and take more time to go through. Whereas if you get to a place and it's like, go to the addendum, then or you could even maybe have just the charter without the addendum if you know you're not gonna be using it, and if it's much shorter, it's easier to use, reference, and digest. And I had one quick question, Kate. If we have thoughts on particular things in here, do you want to hear them now while we're going through?
We'd love to hear them now.
Okay.
So just like go like that.
Yeah, okay.
David had a question.
Yeah, David.
I think it'd be nice to know, first off, which of these committees, boards, and commissions are statutorily authorized and required. So if Bob could go through them and say which ones are necessary, that would be nice. Which segues into the next comment I have, which is that it's unclear to me that some of these committees and positions really still have any meaning, and whether actually they're just historical vestiges, like the weigher of coal and the inspector of lumber, shingles, and wood.
Pound keeper.
I want to say, the fence viewer.
Oh, we could
We
have
did
used
that
the,
once.
we could have used the fence viewer last night at DRB.
Right,
We
but
talked about the fact that there was no fence viewer, and it would have been really nice if we could have had a fence viewer.
Have we appointed one?
I think is it elected or appointed?
No, those
It's an
guys
appointed,
appointed.
select board appointed position.
I
Is
mean,
it
I-
vacant
yeah.
right now?
Yeah,
same with the
they-
honor roll committee and the
Appoint one,
The-
please.
town service officer and the trustee of public funds. I mean, it's not really clear to me that those are anything but historical vestiges at this point, and there might be a reason not to include them if we don't have to have them.
Of that list, just quickly, of what has statutory basis or rooted in statute, the fence viewer, town keeper, lumber, inspectors.
Is it a statutory basis or a statutory mandate?
Oh, that's a different question.
Yeah, that's what I want to know.
That's what you want,
Statutory
okay.
mandate.
Of the mandate ones, you're,
We don't need to know now.
Okay.
We can just
Do
get
you
it
know what
first.
statute it is, by chance?
well, most of it is in Title 24, like for your town clerk, there's a whole section of Title 24 on town clerks, town treasurers, town planning. I mean, and there are restrictions in the statute as to who can be on the planning commission and DRB and who can't be, all that. So, but as far as having to have one, like a development review board, you could have a zoning board of adjustment instead of a development review board. But it's all to say that you have to have one. I believe that section, just to take like the DRB, enables the town to have those boards. But if you're going to have zoning, you're going to have that board. It's impossible to have zoning without those boards. So I'll work on that.
Thank you.
We'll come back to that.
Oh, yeah.
So just as we're kind of pausing, I had a thought on an earlier part of Article 4. So it's Article 4, Section 4C. This is on the vacancies and how they're filled for the select board. So right now, the way I read it is that the next regularly scheduled election, if you refer back to Article 4, Section 1B, a regular election would be the first Tuesday of the month of March, so the town meeting election. So the way this currently stands is that if a select board member were to resign like one day after they're elected and they take their oath and they're on the board, they resign the next day, the select board could appoint somebody and they would sit there as an appointed person and if they were in a 3-year seat, then it would be an entire year minus 1 day or so, or a week, or maybe half a month or something, and then the town would have an opportunity to vote in a new person. If it was in one of the 1-year seats, it's less damaging. But I would urge you all to consider maybe if there's a vacancy, even with one select board member, like within 6 months of their oath or something like that, that there would need to be a special election to vote in a new board member. It just seems like there's already a provision for a special election if there's more than one vacancy, which I think is really important. But having now served on the board for 4 years, and I see the importance of each board member and what they bring, having someone sit for potentially a pretty significant amount of time based solely on having that position with 4 people who decide on them, I think I would encourage you to think about it. Do you have any thought on that?
I don't have a particular time frame, but I think, yeah, going a whole year with an appointed member does seem a little excessive.
And that would be like the worst case scenario if they were.
I think, look at Hillary's worried face.
Well, in reading this, Ian, I'm reading it as whether it's a 1-year term or a 3-year term, the election happens at the next regularly scheduled election. So I hear what you're saying about a year is a long time, but I don't read it as if it's a 3-year term, then that appointed person sits for 3 years.
That's not what I'm saying.
Okay, sorry, I misunderstood
I said
what you
that
said.
the damage done would be less because
Okay.
that appointed person would only sit in that 3-year seat for 1 year. Yeah,
Sorry, I
agreed
misunderstood what
fully.
you're saying.
Those of you may remember, I believe, when York Meyer, he was elected and then resigned, like at the very first meeting, of a year. So you really had a whole year, and that was the bone of contention at the time as to whether there should be an election, because it was shortly after the regular election. So it's a good point to think about.
And I want to just note for the record that I don't know who filled that position, so I'm not making any sort of judgment on that. So I don't know who was the appointed person.
Mr. Meyer, I think.
You're such a lawyer.
Yeah, and then the balance really is it takes a lot to. I know how much work goes into scheduling a special election, and so there's a reason why it's here like this. We don't want to have a special election every month, but I still think it's worth considering.
Flipping the page here, the next one is just a little housekeeping. Your commission is at least as often as every 15 years. We've had great debates over the last 3 or 4 years as to when that 15 years starts. Does it start 15 years from when you're appointed? You may be a couple of years into it by the time you actually get to an amendment. So is it 15 years from any amendments that stem from your commission? Clarity on that would be helpful, because the select board has been hit with various arguments as to they got the timing all wrong on that, and there are different camps on that.
We're ready.
Oh, I just had one. How do we calculate the 10-year townwide reappraisal? Is it off of when the appraisal ends or when it starts?
That's a little easier, well, it's from when it will be as of April 1st on the day that it's, the year that it's effective. So you may be working on a reappraisal for 2 or 3 years, but it's 10 years from when it goes into effect.
So, yeah, so maybe that could be a guide.
So you're thinking when the revisions are adopted?
Yeah, and I think that way you get 10 years of the charter. And that, or sorry, 15 years, I'm thinking 10 years for the, 15 years of the charter, which is, gives it some life so you can see how it works.
How it works.
So, absent other questions, the next section 6 goes to the general powers, duties, and responsibilities of the select board. Now, I want to just juxtapose this 1, 2, it goes over on the next page, almost 3 pages worth of powers, okay? In Title 24, there's this nice little section, it's about yay long, 871 or 872, that says the select board shall have, the general powers and authority to, govern the town. I'm paraphrasing, but it's pretty darn short. And then, of course, there are all sorts of other statutes that fill in the enabling legislation or authority for a select board to act. And they're all over the place. So the drafters of this charter decided to try to take all of those and put them into a long list, very similar to what Title 16 does with school boards. School has a long list of the powers of the electorate of a school district and a long list of the powers of a school board. And just as an aside, we need to go through this and clean up everywhere where it says town school district. That's housekeeping. So the select board, establishes a police department, a fire department, a rescue service department, health services. You're going to go on down the list here, okay? I think the list, and for purposes of your thinking, if there's some power that you think the select board should have that's not on this list, and that's always difficult to think, what are we not thinking about? But note it and bring it to everybody's attention. But then we get down, we had a conversation, Patrick Hillary and me the other day, down to subsection Y, and you get really into the weeds with regard to regulations for what are essentially building code type matters. And our question is, do you want to be that specific or not? It just seems like the paragraphs above that are general topical type subject matters, and then it gets very much into detail, right down to regulations on air conditioning, ventilation of buildings, and the lighting in the building, and minimum dimensions for rooms. I mean, you're really getting into the particulars there. So think about that. That may be more than what we want to dive into the weeds on tonight.
Now, can I bring something up, and don't like go like, oh God, what's Kate thinking when I say this? I mean, we can add powers, but we can also take powers away, right? And we'd have to give them to somebody else.
Right.
I'm not saying I'm thinking about that, but I'm just
Yeah.
throwing that out.
To the extent you take things out of the charter, if that same subject matter is in state statute, for instance, the select board would still have that authority. But as between state statute and the charter, the more specific and the more recent enactment will control over the other, in general. There's arguments on that all the time. But so it's not beyond question to take things out. You may take something out and just leave it to whatever state statute governs it, if that's what your wish is.
So we could, instead of enumerating a lot of these things, we can say that it's the responsibility of the fire department. Because the health inspections, for
Well, you
example.
could, that's a good example with regard to fire safety, is much of that, the way it works with the state, are state regulations and state fire codes that the state fire marshal enforces, sometimes through its own office, but most times, at least in Brattleboro, through the contract that we have, Brattleboro does the enforcement of the state's regulations there. We do have some town ordinances that talk about inspections of buildings, which is a town ordinance.
Right, the rental.
Yeah.
So is enumerating it like this putting us in a position like you were referencing earlier, where if this is different than the state statute, where we could actually be sort of having a different set of rules for Brattleboro than the rest of the state, whereas if we just made it broader, like if for some reason there was case laws that found one select board did something that wasn't within their authority, that would apply here as well.
Short answer is yes, it is that type of a push and pull on it. If you have inconsistent sections in here with what is in state statute, you get yourself into a preemption, whether the state law preempts the town charter on those issues. But of course, the town charter is a legislative enactment, so again, you get into that, what's more recent, what's more specific. But you can spend a lot of time fighting over preemption and not getting whatever the subject matter that's the problem in the town, getting it fixed or accomplished.
One topic for discussion, I think, in this section 6 that Peter has advocated for at least considering has to do with local versus state control, for example, on revenue generation. And we might consider the possibility of including some revenue generation provisions in here that would allow us to have more local control than is currently granted to the town, which acts wholly within the confines of what the state allows us to do.
Not only,
Okay.
go ahead. Not only that, but there's also with regard to whether or not you want to put in here some language that if it is in one town's charter and that's been adopted by the state, this was another thing Peter Elwell was talking about, can other towns adopt that without going through the whole charter amendment process, because if the state has said it's, good for Newfane, why isn't it good for Brattleboro, sort of thing? So that's another one.
I'm just curious, more general question, but it relates to this. Is the commission considering how sort of likely the charter is to be adopted by the legislature in its changes, and sort of like, is that something you're weighing?
We haven't gotten that far yet.
Yeah.
But as Maya and I went through the history of the charter, the '84 charter got hung up in the legislature because of term limits on committee members.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of, I think it'll be, up to us to go, we're going to go for it and put something in that they may not want. Well, obviously, we're going to talk to the local legislators before it goes up there.
Yeah, I think that's one of the mistakes that at least one of the commissions made, is they didn't talk to any of their legislators. And they sent it up to Montpelier, and
yeah, I think that's great to hear. I don't think there's like I don't really have an opinion about it. It's just I'm glad that you're considering it, because I think that revenue point is I could see that really getting sticky, but maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah. It's been a problem for years.
Yeah, that's true.
On the somewhat strange enumeration of what the select board is empowered to do on buildings and codes and all that, compared to the more general language on things about skateboarding, roller skating, and parking lots, I wonder, might there be circumstances under which you really need the more specific language? I see something here about explosives, and if that's not listed explicitly, could someone show up and there's been this whole unfortunate series of events over in the western part of the state where the town of Paulet is deeply involved with somebody who claims specific rights that the courts disagreed with. I'm just wondering, does enumerating things so clearly strengthen the town's hand in any way, and is that something that we should take into account?
Yes, because if it's specifically enumerated, then being what's called a Dillon's Rule state, the towns only have the authority granted to them from the legislature. So the more that the powers are specifically enumerated, and the fact that the charter is a legislative enactment, you would then be having that power. You might run into, like with your example of explosives, into some preemption issues with regard to what you can regulate with regard to firearms that are preempted by some state subject matter preemption. But in general, I would say if it's more specifically enumerated as to your enabling authority, it gives you more power to be specific.
Thank you.
I must confess, this next one, Article 4, Section 6Y14, unless I'm forgetting.
I can.
You got that one?
Yeah, so it was basically as our department was looking through the charter, we found that reading 14 was very unclear as to what it had to do with, right? It references statutes so you can go and look, but adding some language saying that it's talking about building inspectors and the regulation of buildings after enlarging and after the enlarging and prior to consistency. Now I'm a bit confused as to what that is as well. But it basically had to do with the fact, after enlarging and before consistency, so it would read expanding and enlarging building inspectors and the regulation of buildings consistently with this section and the charter. So it's just, when you read it, it doesn't really tell you what it's talking about. So just consider adding some language to clarify it.
moving on, we don't really have much to talk about with regard to Article 5, because that almost mirrors the state statute on town managers. Again, it goes back to the theme of, you could just reference the town manager shall have all the powers as enumerated in Title 24, Section XYZ, okay? But I don't think there has been really any disputes that I can think of with regard to the powers of a town manager with our charter, so that's been a non-issue. Article 6, with regard to school directors, I think the whole thing for right now comes out. The thing to think about, though, would be to potentially have some language about what happens if things change at the state level with your makeup of school districts, to say that in the event your unified union districts somehow are changed, that there is a Brattleboro school district, suppose you could try to tie that in. I think you're going to get some pushback if you try to do that from legislative council, because the school boards are a statutory creature. I think they want to keep control of it. But for right now, I think all that comes out, unless.
David.
Thank you. I do think that we need to revisit whether school board members are ex officio members of town meeting.
Yeah.
And if so, which ones? I mean, it could be Brattleboro representatives
Yeah.
to the school district boards, but I think that needs to be revisited. Because right now it just says school board members. It used to be that both boards sat at the front of the room at town meeting and everybody voted.
Yeah.
So I'd just say, later on in this, we went through and referenced anywhere that the school was listed or mentioned in here, and recommend removing it, and that includes them being ex officio members. And part of that is just remembering that while there are school board members that are elected specifically from Brattleboro, they're elected by the entire unified school district. So all voters in all 4 towns vote for all of these members, and they're meant to represent everybody, not just Brattleboro. So just something to consider in that as you're making that decision.
I mean, the same applies to state senators, or countywide officials. Don't want to take them off of it.
No, then they won't.
See you later.
pass it.
Moving to Article 7 on finances, what jumps to my mind is the Capital Grant Review Board. And every year that comes up and somebody says, well, what does it do? And it says, well, they either didn't meet or they met once just to organize and didn't really do anything. So I would love to go back and find the why that was put in. And maybe you have found that, but I think it was originally put in with the idea, similar to a finance committee, that you were going to have a board that really reviewed all of your grants and your large capital expenditures. Now what we do is we come in with a capital plan that Patrick works on, and it goes out, many, many years. And every year there's some tweaking to it. If times are lean, you might put off a police car for the next year, or move things up depending on deterioration. But so much of that capital plan is already in the process. There's the check and balance of the finance committee on it. My question is whether you just want to delete that section. But
I remember
Good question.
something, I don't know, we can go back and look why. There was at this point, like everybody was having like these power grabs, you know what I mean? Like everybody wanted power. So whoever was pushing this.
Yeah,
But it
there
was a
was
good-
some, yeah. I don't think there was a good reason to put it in.
Yeah.
I think it was like one person that was thinking it was a great idea. Well, we go back and look, but it doesn't really do anything.
I think they met when I was on select board.
I was on it at one point, but I never went.
Yeah,
to
I
the
was
meeting.
on it, and I never met with anybody.
The tough thing too is when you take out the school board stuff, then you'd have 2 appointed by the select board and 2 from representative town meeting. So you got 4 people. I don't know. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me,
Yeah.
but there are some things I just simply don't understand. So yeah, if you
We'll
can
go back and-
educate me on that, I'm happy to be educated.
We'll find the, how it came about, because I remember reading it in one of our many memos.
Yeah.
Before he goes to the addenda, which I think is what's next,
Yeah.
I think the charter amendments provision needs to be clarified. There is substantial confusion as we head into town meeting annually about a charter amendment process and what is binding and what is not and when it needs to be brought up.
Right.
And so those protocols need to be tightened and clarified.
Especially with regard to subsection C, which talks about a resolution of representative town meeting. Because sometimes you, under other business, and David and I have had this conversation, you have a resolution that's brought up under other business. Well, under other business, it's non-binding. So you may then have a resolution, we should adopt, or we should change the charter. And the way we've done that in the past is if it rises to that level, then we put it on the warning for the following representative town meeting to adopt a resolution. And then there's even a next town meeting when you read that section that it has to go again and then up to the legislature. That is a torturous route for that. So I agree with you, David.
And the 16-year-old, they got the signatures on the petition, right? Is that how that one happened?
That went pursuant to the statute, which
Right.
is subsection A.
Right.
That's the manner to do it by petition.
Right, that's.
So you've got by petition, subsection B is by the select board, which is really the easiest route. And in fact, I forget who I was mentioning this to, several times ago when the Charter Revision Commission came up with its recommendations, you can either follow the procedure set forth in subsection D, but what one commission did is they came to a select board meeting and said, hey, if you want to adopt these as your recommendation, then why don't you make it a select board proposal? And boom, it went from there to the voters of the town by Australian ballot, and it jumped midstream, so to speak, the 2 processes.
But it can
So-
also be harder. It depends on who's on the select board and what you're asking them to do. Do you know what I
Correct.
mean? So the
Yeah.
signature one for the youth people went quicker. You know, because they just went and got their 425 signatures and it went.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So it's sort of like one,
Well, and that's what's interesting, is that jumped, the other major factor, the way that was done that time, is it jumped straight to the voters of, at large, is what I say, as compared to going to representative town meeting members for a vote, which is the way the charter revision section calls for.
So when you say 425 votes,
Or
425 signatures, which provision did that follow?
Subsection A, because you're talking 5%.
Oh, so that's 5% of the voters is what
Yeah.
17, 26, 45
Yeah, that's
says?
5%.
yeah, yeah. I was just making I think that's the only reason I said 425, because I thought that's, remember what they put in or something, but it was like 5%. I could be making that number up, but I remember it being something like that.
It was 5%.
Yeah.
Well, then we should compare those numbers then, it seems to me, to what's in Article 3, Section 2, Article 3 about the powers to get things adopted for ordinances. and
Make them consistent.
frivolous petitions and ordinances and bylaws and the like.
Yeah.
Am I wrong? Frivolous petitions? That's what it says here. Non-relevant, they'll say non-relevant.
There you go.
You'll change that word.
The other question that just, thank you for bringing this up, that jumps into my mind just right now, is under subsection B, where it's by the select board, and then it goes to the voters of the town at large by Australian ballot. Should that not, the question for you is, would you want a select board proposed amendment to go to RTM as compared to straight to the voters? That's a question to think about. And jumping to addendum A, Hillary, do you want to jump in here? A lot of this has more to do with the representative town meeting in the district.
Sure. So addendum A, section 2A talks about districts and redistricting. It mentions that there are 4 districts. Brattleboro actually has 3 districts, so you might want to consider changing that in here. And then the redistricting, the statewide reapportionment happens every 10 years, and we usually do our townwide redistricting at that same time. And so you might want to consider changing that language from every 5 years to every 10 years to be consistent with that. Sort of going along with that in section 3B, the charter says that it will happen on the 15th day of December, and because the redistricting reapportionment oftentimes happens earlier, and we need to get the select board to sign off, the Board of Civil Authority needs to get the select boards to sign off on that. It's a lot easier if we can do it on or before December 15th rather than on December 15th. The select board doesn't always have a select board meeting on December 15th, and for them to have to hold a special meeting for this specific purpose doesn't necessarily make sense. So you might want to consider that. In section 4A 1B, in the charter it says a notice of intent prepared by a town meeting member on his or her own behalf. That is not a practice that we have used in quite a long time. The notice of intent is prepared, but it's prepared by the town clerk's office, and then we mail it out. And part of that is there's some information in there that we need to put somebody's name on the ballot. And so it's helpful if we're just preparing it because we know the information that we need. Section 6G, it just says consider replacing meeting with meetings. I'm trying to find where that is.
That's just a typo, I see.
Right, all town
Yeah.
meetings shall be public, should be all town meetings. In section 7, there have been many discussions as we approach RTM each year as to what is a quorum. Is it 50% plus 1 of the number of seats available? Is it 50% plus 1 of the number of seats that are filled? Is it 50% plus 1 of the number of people that signed in that morning? And so for the sake of the moderator to not need to think about that each year, as well as for the public to understand, it might be worth clarifying what that is in the charter.
Isn't it, don't we decide every year that it's 50% plus 1 of the total number?
I believe so, but again, I would need to go back and look because it's always a question. And if it were clarified in the charter, it wouldn't be a question.
Well, in 6, if you go up to section 6, though, 6D and E talk to that. A majority of all town meeting members shall constitute a quorum.
But is that all town meeting member seats that are available or all town meeting member seats that are filled?
We'll clarify that.
Okay.
Yeah, or or town meeting members that are present. Right?
Yeah, we do 50% plus one of
The total
number
numbers.
of slots plus ex officio members.
Yeah. So we'll have to clarify that too with what we do on ex officio.
Shall I move on?
Yeah.
Okay. In section 7, it talks about the process of closing polls and the timing of that if there is a bond issue, which needs to go to Australian ballot of the representative town meeting members. After we went to Zoom and one of the meetings went over to a second day, it just called the question to consider what happens, what's the process if the meeting goes to a second day. Do the polls close at the end of that first day, a half hour after we recess? Does it go to the second day? And that would just be helpful to clarify that for the town clerk's office, because we need to know when we need to count those ballots and, you know, make sure everything is secure if it's going over to the second day. So section 8 speaks to if there is a referendum from representative town meeting, right? So something is voted and then it's decided that, you know, we need to relook at that vote from representative town meeting. The way that this lays it out is there needs to, within 5 days of the vote, there needs to be a petition that brings in, I think, 250 signatures or 50 signatures from representative town meeting members. And then once that is certified by the town clerk's office, the select board has to warn that special election to vote on that within 14 days. That all seems reasonable to us, but then it goes on to say that within 10 days of the warning, we need to hold the special election. I believe that this was likely written before absentee voting became really popular, and we feel that 10 days is not enough time to really notify the voters, have them request their ballots, send them out, and get them returned. So we would ask that you consider adding a week to that. We wouldn't want to add much more to that, because if it were, say, a budget, and then that budget vote failed in that referendum vote, we would need to go through this process as many times as we need to in time for the next fiscal year to start. So we're not asking to add a whole lot of time, just an extra week.
One other thing on referendum, if I can just add there, is that my suggestion, and I entirely agree with what Hillary just mentioned, but you have referendum also under Article 3, Powers of the People, Section 4 is referendum. And then in the addendum, you have this whole section on referendum, and they're somewhat inconsistent. There is a provision in the main part of the charter that says the main part controls over the addendum, and that's okay, but then the addendum goes into far more detail with regard to what Hillary was just talking about. My suggestion is that when you figure out the details of adding that extra week in, etc., to take that whole section and put it into Article 3, Section 4, as compared to having it in the addendum. And that way you will have one section, it's not inconsistent with another section.
Okay, so section 12, again, just a typo. It says this act shall affect, and it should say this act. So you might want to consider correcting that. And then addendum C, trying to remember exactly what this was. Bob, do you?
So
I'm sorry to jump in, but looks to me like addendum A that we've just been going through is actually the language
Right,
of the statute from 1959.
yes.
It is.
So I don't think we're really going to be changing the language of the act from 1959. if we need to make these changes, we're gonna have to look in the earlier part of the charter to make sure that it's conformed to what we want it to read like. But this is the statute that's included here. Whether we want to include it or not is a different question.
Right.
Well, but you can amend that statute. That statute holds no higher or lower status than any other statute.
But is it ours to amend, though?
Well,
I'm
the
saying-
legislature,
Right.
This is just a
I see
verbatim
what you're
copy.
saying.
Right.
If we want to make changes to this, we just got to make sure those changes are reflected in the active charter. This is just setting forth what we did in 1959, but we want to include it
That's a, okay,
going forward
I see what you're saying.
is a separate question.
So what you're really saying is bring all of that into the main section of
Yeah.
the charter and not have an addendum.
Right.
Okay, good point. One other thing before addendum C is with regard to the rules of procedure, addendum B. There is always some debate on Robert's rules. And as moderator, maybe you want to talk to this, but we do have voting by standing and division, and that's very specific to this addendum. But in all other respects, we typically will resort to Robert's Rules of Order. It doesn't necessarily say that, though there's some grounding of that under the state statute for town moderators. But for better or for worse, I think we should make some reference to Robert Rules of Order. It would clarify things.
I'd like to revisit whether we need to stand for every vote.
Keeps people
It was
awake,
said,
David.
it was said to be something that maintained accountability.
And that started, I think, in the 2000s
Yeah.
thing, that charter change, then that happened, yeah.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
decided we should stand.
Right.
But it was accountability,
Literal
yeah.
standing?
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
what's ableist.
You have to go like this.
Well, but it goes to the fact that it's a representative form of
Yeah.
government. So if you are in a community and you're electing your representative to the representative town meeting, you want to know how your representative voted. And so the only way to really do that is by standing and watching it on BCTV or going in person.
But in Montpelier,
I asked
they
that we
don't go
revisit
down.
it.
Yeah.
Standing is nice though, because otherwise we just sit.
I heard that.
Are you ready to go?
Ready for addendum C?
See, we're ready.
So, I think in our combined opinion, it might be worth just striking addendum C in its entirety. In the opening paragraph, it states things such as, these descriptions are included for the purpose of information, because the various positions and bodies described herein may change from time to time. The reader is advised to seek current information from the town manager's office.
Okay.
So I think if I can reflect our original position, why not just eliminate this? If in fact you choose to keep it, there is some additional, we think, unnecessary language after the listers about the moderator. I'm not sure why specifically that language is there. It says the moderator presides over all meetings. Interesting. If you choose to preserve addendum C, should the housing authority be renamed Brattleboro Housing Partnerships, which is, it may not be, because I think that's a separate corporation, but that is how they're operating most of their properties these days. If it is retained, should we add Red Clover Commons? But above all, consider whether or not addendum C is worth including at all.
How else will we know what the wearer of code is?
I know. But my mother was a fence viewer, my father was wearer of coal. They didn't do anything.
And then the next two sections were a really wonderful job by Hillary to identify every citation of the school directors, and then some sections where you maybe should consider revising pronouns.
Thank you, this is super. Does anyone have any questions or last comments? And I do want to thank Ian and Franz, and they have invited us when we're ready to come to a full select board meeting and have engage in a conversation of where we are and maybe get the public into it.
Yeah, if I can speak to that for just a moment, and I appreciate that, Kate. Yeah, I think it would be great when you guys feel ready to tell us about what's been going on, and I think there'll be members of the public that don't really recall us appointing you all to this commission or really know what you're doing at all. So a little education, and I think it would get people excited, and we can help to push out a schedule. Especially, and I guess the one thing I wanted to, because I didn't really know that we were speaking to individual items as we were going through tonight, I really think the discussion about RTM and the number of members and justification for it is one where you could probably generate quite a bit of interest and discussion. And so I would encourage you, if you're making a schedule, if you have a day, a meeting where you're just talking about RTM, I think would be a really interesting conversation.
I have two things. First, three things. First, is this all the input from all town departments? So there was nothing from planning and zoning?
Correct.
Not from full select board. I actually, to be
Yeah,
clear,
not from the select board.
I never saw this until tonight. So I walked through this with you.
I talked to Sue Fillion, and she
Just not interested.
didn't, no, she said she
Oh,
didn't
sorry.
really have anything.
A lot of the planning department and zoning is so prescribed by state statute that I think the planning department's position is that it doesn't necessarily need to go into the charter, it's already there.
So that was one question. Do we anticipate hearing from select board as a group? And do we anticipate that would be following a select board discussion? And are we gonna come to you all, or are you gonna come to us? What would you prefer?
Yeah, I thought we could talk about it for a second now, if that's
Yeah.
appropriate. So I could see a really productive conversation at the select board meeting. I think a back and forth would be really good for the board, for you all, and also the public to watch and participate in. I also understand that our meetings are long, and I don't want to waste the committee's time, and I don't know if you all could come to a select board meeting. So there's a little bit of a question there. So I think that we could do it at a board meeting. I'd be happy to. I also know that I wasn't able to sort of poll the rest of the select board about their issues or ideas they had about the charter, and if you're interested in hearing from them, I think a board meeting would be an appropriate place for it. And maybe that could be different than a meeting where you come to present about kind of where you're at.
Well, we had talked about having meetings on specific parts of the charter, like RTM and elections, and I don't know, other things will come to mind. And announcing that we're talking about RTM on whatever date.
And I would probably speak to that at chair remarks and at the select board meeting and say, "Ooh, charter review's talking about," yeah. Because it's, I was even thinking tonight, oh man, the whole charter, what are we going to talk about? It's a lot of information. So.
I just want to remind folks, I got something on the screen here, I'm not sure if you can see it. We've been hoping, or at least if I understand the commission is hoping to push out a longer view of these are meetings that are going to be coming up, and these are some of the discussions that will be taking place at those meetings. It's this October meeting and the desire for the commission to meet in some way with the select board that's keeping this from going out. So if there's a date that we might be able, or maybe we take the select board off and if you want that to be later in the year. We've got things lined up for the November meeting, and the December meeting is all about just the general public. The question I would ask if there can be a meeting of the minds in terms of a select board meeting or a meeting of the select board here at the Charter Revision Commission, that would enable us to be able to push this out more broadly across social media.
What's your pleasure?
So we are the agenda setting committee of the select board, so we're more than happy to try to accommodate your all's schedule for what works. I also think that you'll probably get some questions from the select board about like where you're at and what the schedule is going to be at whatever the first one you go to. And so I want to give you time to have all of that so that we can push it out to the public then. So whenever that sort of feels good for you. I think we're going to be in budgeting season, and so it's going to get tighter as we get. So I would say either we try to do it pretty soon, or we push it out a bit till maybe we're a little bit through budget. How do you feel about that?
Yep.
Great, that's vice chair.
So we could set something up for October and just to hear what the select board has to say.
So I think though, I'm just thinking like about what that will look like, and they'll probably want some guidance about kind of what you're looking for. If we feel like we can kind of get there, that's totally acceptable.
Like a list of questions
Or
something.
yeah, I think maybe we can work together to create a backup material memorandum or something coming from the commission. I think there would need to be a little bit of structure to the discussion, more than just kind of like, okay, select board, what do you want to hear? What do you want us to do about the
And with the October 17th, that's one of our meetings, right?
Yeah.
I believe that's a select board meeting.
Oh, it is?
day.
Okay.
It
I
is.
couldn't remember. I don't have my calendar.
And so it's just, it was a proposed time. I know that the CRC wanted to meet potentially in October. Yeah, that's a select board
That's
meeting.
it.
The two select board meetings in October are the 3rd and the 17th.
Now, should we, maybe we can have a conversation, or the power couples here, can have a conversation and figure out if you folks still think, if you thought the 17th would work on your schedule, maybe you need to look at that first.
I was just thinking, we have an agenda setting meeting on Monday morning. Yeah.
Why don't you do that, and then if you folks say, yeah, we can accommodate you folks on the 17th, we make it our mission to make sure there was something, structured, so you're not putting something on your agenda and we're all sitting there going like, well, why are we all here? You know what I mean? We want to make it.
Okay. And
Does that make sense? Or
Not having thought about this, it strikes me that this would really be an opportunity for you to get a message out to the general public. And that, I think maybe that's what the focus would be at our select board meeting. If it were just sort of a vague what's up kind of thing, I don't think it would be as good a use of time. So I think it would depend on when you're ready to get that message out. When you know what you want to say to people, then we'd be very glad to help you bring that.
per usual, Franz is much more articulate and has put it much better than I have.
David?
I think part of the goal of meeting with Select Board was to hear whether Select Board had any input or priorities, either individually or as a group, for the charter revision process. And so we can present that at the meeting on the 17th, and then hope to get whatever input might come at a later date. So maybe we don't want to
Bingo.
Yeah.
That's
present
perfect.
where we are,
Yeah.
what we've done, what the thoughts are, and then solicit input for a later time.
That's basically, that's perfect, because I think that helps to ground us, and I think we can have a really interesting conversation about that, for sure.
we can put like since I know Dave, we know what you need in the backup material, we can put a nice, here's what we've been doing, here's where we are, and here's what, you know, we want you folks to think about.
Absolutely, and you'll also have an opportunity if you all would like to hear. The public will be at the meeting too,
Yeah.
and we'll have an opportunity to speak on it and maybe have some thoughts.
We just request early in the agenda.
Yeah.
So it's predictable.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah.
We'll put it on consent. So, I want to say a little bit about just, I'm going to digress a little. I remember when there were 4 districts in Brattleboro. And District 4 was actually part of the Vernon-Guilford Legislative District. And the part in Brattleboro was really small. I don't remember how many voters, but it was a pretty small fraction of what Districts 1, 2, and 3 were. So I ran for town meeting. I can't remember if it was 88 or 89. And I ran in District 2, where I live. And in all of town, including District 4, I got the fewest votes of anybody running for town meeting.
Did you get elected?
No. I mean, it was, all the people in District 4, whether they won or lost, got more votes than I did. And that's just to illustrate that town meeting used to be a coveted position. And obviously those days are pretty long gone. So, you know, when I heard about the Charter Review Commission, that really became my focus, which is what's up with town meeting? How come nobody wants to be on town meeting anymore? And I don't think there's anything in the charter that can do much about that, probably. But the whole question of what is town meeting? Why is it valuable? The really big picture is important to me in this discussion. Maybe it's too big a picture, I don't know. But I think that time for that in the town of Brattleboro is here, for that discussion to happen somehow. And it could be reflected in what the charter says, because, you know, I think there's 3 levels of things that I would be considering. One is just the cleanup, anachronisms, typos, gender references, whatever. Okay, obvious, yes, we're going to do that. Then there's kind of substantive changes to specific provisions, which we've been through a number of them, and that was a really good discussion, I thought. But then there's also the bigger picture. And for example, there are some really big questions that come up again and again that could be resolved in the course of your discussions, perhaps. I'm thinking of the ability to change line items in the budget. You know, is that something we want to enable RTN to do, or do we want to continue to prohibit that? That's a big question. The number of representatives is a big question. Should there be different occasions and agendas for representative town meeting? Should we have one representative town meeting that's just the budget, and then another town meeting for referenda questions and general topics? And I'd really like to see town meeting be more popular. And I don't know how to get there, but I think some of the things that you're looking at might have an effect. Thank you. Also, thank you for inviting us here tonight. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for coming.
The only other thing is that there's been a concern among some members of the commission about how notice of meetings is circulated. So agendas and minutes are not being emailed to the commission members. And we're sort of left to try to guess when the next meeting's gonna be.
Yeah, I'll take responsibility.
But it's not, but it wasn't just you, it's
No,
for four.
I'm just saying that, I talked to Denise earlier, and I will send an email reminding people of the meeting.
Yeah,
I
but
mean, that can
the
be-
town manager's office should be sending the notice with the agenda and the minutes to the commission members when it's going out for public notice. It's the way it's worked on every board that I've ever been part of. And it's not been happening.
It has not been happening, and I'm happy to do so. Forgive me for not thinking of it, but, we
Yeah,
get
that's
the
the problem.
agenda out, and, we make sure it goes out on social media, and we do this and this, but, absolutely. we can
I'll-
email.
Well, this way, I will work with Patrick.
Sure.
And
Sure.
Although I'm thinking about adopting this method for the select board, we'll just send it to everybody but the select board members.
Agendas and minutes, no problem whatsoever.
I knew that this was a meeting because last week I was asked to put the agenda together. I said, okay, I'll do that.
I only knew about it because Ian told me. I only knew about it because Ian told me.
Because
And Ian read the press release.
yeah.
Yeah, I read the press release.
Which did get in the paper.
Yeah.
That's how I got here.
Mine was Instagram.
I will completely own that. I will also completely resolve that. And moving forward, we'll get agendas, minutes, and if there's available backup ahead of time, we'll get that to you as well.
Thank you so much.
Can I ask whether if we go to the select board on the 17th, which is a Tuesday, just to talk a little bit about where we are and what we're doing, and do we want to meet on the 19th and have a meeting to start discussing some of these items? Or do we want to skip October?
Not to like make this the big thing. I'm not gonna be here.
Oh,
So,
wait, are you not going to be here on the 17th?
yeah, but I don't want the meeting not to happen with you folks because of me not being here.
We can, I think we just picked that one. Do you want us to look at, I can also look, you're now the chair, right? Would
Right, but
really-
there were like all these other smart people, so.
Okay.
Well, think about it, because it's kind of immaterial to us. It's really when you're ready and when you want to do it.
So, and we're kind of trying a new budgeting system this year, so it might not be quite as crazy. So we might actually be able to accommodate this.
But to me, I think, I'm fine not being at the select board meeting. I'm just saying if we do one on the 19th, I won't, be here to start this stuff.
Is the first November meeting is the one where we do the budget overview traditionally? I don't know if that's still the plan.
Right, but again, don't switch the select
That's
board date
fine, yeah.
because of me.
Ian, I'm sorry, what's your question?
I'm just wondering do you know if the first meeting in November is still kind of the traditional budget overview?
I seem to recall that the schedule that the select board adopted for this coming year actually has the first budget meeting, well, in some ways, the first budget meeting is September 28th over at the library. But at a regular select board meeting, I believe it's the second meeting, which would be the 21st.
So,
What I'm saying is, I am fine with not being at the select board meeting.
okay.
I'm more talking if we have a meeting 2 days later as a commission.
Yeah.
Are you, our fearless leader, going to be here on October 19th?
No, that's what I'm saying. Like, the 17th is the select board, but I won't be, and that's, you can move ahead with both. I think I don't need to be there with the select board, because again, you folks are all really smart people. But it would just be, I wouldn't be here on the 19th to go over all this other stuff.
Okay.
But that's our sort of decision to
Yeah.
make.
Once you let us know,
Yeah.
we
Well,
don't
I
need to
think-
know right now.
But
Yeah,
I-
and I think,
I
we
think
will.
I think we should go ahead though with the 17th with the select board, don't you?
Yeah,
think so?
it's just gonna be a short agenda item.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not
Nothing,
gonna have.
nothing
Yeah.
on the select board is a
Well,
short agenda
I
item.
realize that, but I'm just saying,
Yeah, because
I'm not gonna go into
No.
a lot of detail and get a lot of feedback and.
Yeah,
I think it's up to us to figure out, do we meet on the 19th?
okay.
But I think the 17th we should do with the select board to get it going.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you change your mind about that, I think the November 7th would also be a totally appropriate meeting to do this. So, But we can,
Are you back on the 26th?
Yes.
Can we have a commission meeting on the 26th to start working through some of these items as a working meeting?
Is the 26th a Thursday?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Peter hopefully will be able to come as well.
okay, so 17th for us, you guys, yep, okay.
So the 17th is good with the select
Yep.
board?
Of course, we didn't talk to John about that, but sure, whatever, it'll work.
Pretty confident he'll do whatever you say.
Does the 26th work for people?
Which month?
Without a calendar.
October?
It's the last Thursday.
It's the last Thursday in October.
I'm assuming you can do the select board.
What?
I'm assuming you can.
I'm sorry?
I'm guessing.
And we can figure the topics
Yeah.
and put them out on the agenda.
Yeah, you guys can do that. and-
No, I mean, you and I
Oh, yeah.
before the 26th.
Oh, yeah, we can.
Plus, you just punched me in my fascination.
Does that work, the 26th?
26th, that work
Yes.
for everybody?
Yep.
Okay.
Does that work for you, Pete? Patrick?
Yeah, that's fine.
I'll have it.
Yeah, I'll be there.
Okay.
October 26th, what would we like to title that one? I'm assuming you still want to try and get something like this out,
Yes,
so.
yeah. We're gonna go, what are we gonna do? We're gonna
Probably
go
a
over
little
this
bit of the
stuff?
select board, whatever we
Yeah.
hear reflections of that, and then I guess, yeah, it could be to review what the
Right.
city, the town has presented to us.
In more detail. We'll take this.
A little bit of
this-
homework though too,
Yeah.
for us, to actually go through them.
Yeah, and we'll take the discussion points and get them, the ones that we know are discussion points, and we can go over those in more detail. Obviously, more things will come up, but we'll use this as our guide.
Okay. So add one in here on the 26th,
Yeah.
and I'll come up with some language, and I'll shoot it past
Yeah.
Joy and Kate as to, review town recommendations or something to that
Yeah.
effect.
Yeah.
Okay. And the next two meetings, the November meeting and the 21st in the December, those I'm assuming would still state, just so that everybody on the commission is aware. I emailed the chairs of each of the town boards and commissions. I asked them, or actually let them know, that the commission would like to hear from them if they have any particular opinions as a body. There's enough time built in here for them to be able to warn a meeting for that purpose, conduct a discussion, determine if they have any particular recommendations, and then get those recommendations. Hopefully, I asked them if they wouldn't mind sending them to me in advance so I could forward them on to you folks. But of course, they're all either individually or collectively welcome to show up to the meeting on November 16th. And it seemed to be fairly well received.
I'll give you DRB's, I'll send you an email. We talked about it last night.
Yeah, I think those are good subjects.
Okay, so this is still good with this one addition?
Yeah.
Cool. And I'm assuming if I can have Seth revise this maybe in the next day or so, we might want to just start pushing it
I
out?
agree.
Yeah.
Yes,
Cool.
definitely.
Very good.
You could make the meeting on the 26th an executive session, then you don't have to tell anybody what it's about.
No.
All right, so we'll get you folks the memo for the October 17th. Was that it?
Yeah.
Whatever
Yeah.
the board meeting is.
Yeah,
We'll get you a nice memo for backup material, and then everybody here will show up, I mean.
and I'm really grateful for the conversation about it tonight, because I feel a lot, I feel like with this understanding, it's gonna be a good conversation.
Thanks for coming, and Bob and Patrick and Hillary, and you two, obviously, and our public, and our BCTV person. So I think we have a plan.
And we have a lot to discuss.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Does someone want to make a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
All those in favor? Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Now I shouldn't have said that.